of water. People are suffering. I mean, there's a lot going on behind the scenes here, and I just need you to be reminded of the circumstances and just how dire they are. God's had Elijah in hiding for a while. He hid him by the brook Kerith. He hid him in Zarephath, that land of the enemy. Remember, that's where Jezebel was from. But the widow took care of Elijah while he was there. The Lord provided miraculously the oil and the flour, and so they were able to survive during that time. And now we come to say that God says, no longer will you hide yourself, Elijah. I want you to go show yourself. And he sends him back to King Ahab. So that's what the Lord has told him to do. Now skip over to verse 17. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is this you, you troubler of Israel?" Now, I need you to understand what Ahab has just said to him. In the Hebrew, he's called him a snake in the grass. That's literally what the word troubler means. The root form means snake. You snake of a man. You snake in the grass. You troubler of Israel. It's your fault, Elijah, that we're suffering. It's your fault that we've experienced the drought. I mean, after all, that's what Elijah said to Ahab back in 17 verse 1. He said, it's not going to rain except by my word. God had sent him to say that. God had let Elijah know, I'm going to use you as my spokesman during this time of judgment. And they need to understand, they've fallen away from me. They've been rebellious, disobedient. And Elijah, I'm going to use you. Now Ahab looks at him and says, I've been looking for you. I've wanted you dead for these 3.5 years. You're the reason that we've suffered the drought. Now look at Elijah's response, verse 18. I've not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have, because you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and you have followed the Baals. Now then, send and gather to me all Israel at Mount Carmel, together with 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of the Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent a message among all the sons of Israel, brought the prophets together at Mount Carmel. Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you hesitate between two opinions? Some of us in this room are old enough to remember the Thrilla at Manila. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Some of you who are not athletic fans may not. It was the heavyweight champion fight between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. Took place in the Philippines, and if you'll remember, no charge for this extra bit of information. They renamed the location of that sports facility, and they called it, just for that fight, the Coliseum. The Coliseum of the Philippines. And the reason they did that was because that when you say Coliseum, most people trace back into history to ancient Rome, where the gladiators fought. And so what I'm showing you is that the producers, the public relations people, as they marketed this heavyweight fight, they wanted people to get excited about it. Of course, they wanted the revenue to be there. They wanted the money to come and so forth. And at that time, it was one of the highest payouts that any fighters had ever experienced. But it was called the Thrilla at Manila. I'm saying all of that to let you know that if there had been producers and PR agents in the days of Elijah, when Elijah went and said, call everybody to Mount Carmel, I've got something to say, and we're going to do something to demonstrate just how far away we've wandered from God. I think the producers would have called this Showdown on Mount Carmel. It had been on every bulletin board. You drive down, you ride down on your camel on the interstate there in ancient Israel. You with me? You look out there on the bulletin board and it say, come to the Thriller at Manila. Come to the Showdown on Mount Carmel. Historians tell us that this was a holiday time. People would have gathered together. They'd wanted to be there. They were in their festive attire and robes. And Elijah says, God has given me a word, and we need to meet together to talk seriously about the status and the condition of our nation. Now, he is referring to the spiritual state. And I think if you've been in church for any length of time, you've heard this story, you know where I'm going, and you know most of the details, and we're going to read it quickly together. But I just sort of want to just give you a picture of what God is doing. Can I do that? Because I think some of us are wondering, why is God about to do this, to bring Elijah to face these false prophets of Baal and the prophetesses of Asherah? What's going on here? Well, James Cook was an explorer in the 18th century. He was commissioned by the British government, and he started out in the Navy, but people noticed that he was a great sailor. And when they noticed that, they said, we want you to go explore uncharted waters. And so he was one of the first to make point in Australia and to circumnavigate New Zealand, and he would bring that information back for whatever it was used as they began to try to chart the waters of that day. But because he spent time on the ship for an extended time, he realized that his crew had potential for vitamin deficiencies. There were a lack of things that they could keep on the ship for, months at a time, like fruit, because it would spoil. And they had no vitamin C, and as a result, in that day, they suffered from scurvy. And it was a serious disease.